World War I, also known as the Great War, was fought between 1914 and 1918. The war was fought between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire on one side, with Russia, America, France, and Britain on the other. The Espionage Act was passed on June 15th. This was an attempt to protect the war effort from spies and enemies of the U.S. It made it illegal to disrespect the government and the military. And if you mentioned anything pertaining to the military, this includes deployment locations and locations of bases, you could be sentenced to 10 years in prison with a fine of $10,000.
The perfect example of this was Big Bill Haywood. He was a labor organizer and he was convicted of sabotaging the war effort because he encouraged workers to strike for fair pay and decent working conditions. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for his troubles, but then he was bailed out and sent to Russia.
The Sedition Act of 1918 was passed on May 16th. This was an attempt to limit the First Amendment rights, freedom of speech. This made it illegal to speak out against the government or the military in a public setting. Mitchell Palmer was the person who enforced the Sedition Act and was working under President Wilson. An example of this is the case of Eugene V. Debs, who spoke out against the war in Canton, Ohio. During a protest, he was arrested and placed in jail after being found guilty. Eugene V. Debs even ran for president while he was in jail. He almost got 1 million votes. Mr. V. Debs was released in 1921 because President Wilson, on his last day in office, repealed the Sedition Act. Anti-German propaganda was used in World War I in multiple countries like America, Britain, and France during and after the war. This is the fear of foreigners, and was used to convince the public that the Espionage and Sedition Acts were necessary to protect the United States from the Germans during the war. The Espionage and Sedition Acts of 1917 and 1918 were used to keep the United States in a place of fear, of jail, and of the fines. This ties into World War I by protecting the government information and by protecting America and American allies during the war. There were an estimated over 10,000 people prosecuted via the Espionage and Sedition Act.